Welcome to Chabad of YouTube. We're doing Chumash, Chukas, the first portion, and we're going to do this with Rashi. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Zois Chukas HaTorah Asher Tziva Adonai Lemahar Daber El Bnei Yisrael V'yichu Eilecha Vara Aduma Temima Asher Ein Ba Mum Asher Loi Allah Aleha Oil. This is the statute of the Torah which the Lord commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and have them take for you a perfectly red unblemished cow, upon which no yoke was laid. It's a red heifer. What does Rashi have to say? Okay, I don't have the Matsuda Chumash yet, so I'm just going to do this in English when it's Rashi's. I don't really read without the vowels. This is the statute of the Torah, because Satan and the nations of the world taunt Israel, saying, What is this commandment, and what purpose does it have? Therefore the Torah uses the term statute. I have decreed it. You have no right to challenge it. And have them take for you. It will always be called on your name. The cow which Moses prepared in the desert. Midrash Tanchuma Chukat 8ch 8 Yosef. So those of you that don't know this already, Chukos are laws that don't understand. That you can't understand. There's three types of mitzvahs. There are chukos, laws that you can't understand, like the red heifer. There's mishpatim, laws that completely are understood, like don't kill, don't steal, don't, love your fellow Jew as yourself. All these things that make sense, to have modesty, whatever. Then there are edus, which are laws that make sense only after you learn the Torah. Adma Samima, perfectly red. So in Hebrew, Aduma Tamima is red perfect. It shall be perfect in redness, so that two black hairs disqualify it. Sifrei Chukat 5. Now, these days in Golus, in exile, we don't have the red heifer yet. And when Mashiach comes, it will happen again, and all the Jews will lose their blemishes. The whole world will have no blemish. Un satem oisamel Elazar hakohen v'hoitzi oisa el michoitz lamachane v'shachat oisa lefanav. And you shall give it to Eleazar the Kohen, and he shall take it outside the camp and slaughter it in his presence. Eliezer mitzvah b'segin. The mitzvah was performed by the deputy to the Kohen Gadol. Sifrei Chukat. El mechutz lemachneh chutz l'shalosh mechonos. Outside the camp, outside all three camps. And slaughter in his presence, a non-Kohen slaughters it while Eliezer watches. Yoma 42a. V'lakach Eliezer hakohen midama be'etz be'oi v'hiza el noichach b'nei oihel moed midama sheva pe'amin. Eliezer the Kohen shall take from its blood with his finger and sprinkle it toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. Toward the front of the tent of meeting. In later generations, when this rite will be performed outside the temple in Jerusalem, he is to stand to the east of Jerusalem and to direct his gaze toward the entrance to the temple while sprinkling the blood. Sifrei Chukat 14. V'sarav es hapara le'einav es oira ve'es besara ve'es dama al pirsha yisroif. The cow shall then be burned in his presence. Its hide, its flesh, its blood, with its dung, he shall burn it. V'lakach hakohen eitz erez ve'ezoiv ushni soy laas vehishlich el toich sirefas hapora. The Kohen shall take a piece of cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson wool, and cast them into the burning of the cow. V'chibes begadav hakohen v'rakach b'sarui b'mayim. V'achar yavoi el hamachane v'tameh hakohen ad ha'arev. The Kohen shall wash his garments and bathe his flesh in water, and then he may enter the camp, and the Kohen shall be unclean until evening. Enter the camp. What does that mean? What is Rashi saying? The camp of the divine presence, because no ritually unclean person is banished from two camps, except one who experienced a flow, one who experienced a seminal emission, or one afflicted with saras. Hence he is admitted to the one camp from which he was banished. P.S. whatever that is. Oh, Pesach 67a. That's the Gemara. And the Kohen shall be unclean until evening. Transpose it the verse and explain it thus. He shall be unclean until evening, and then he may enter the camp. Behas reif oisa yechabes begadav Bamayim v'rachatz b'savroi bamoyim v'tameh ad ha'arev. The one who burns it shall wash his clothes in water and cleanse his body in water, and he shall be unclean until evening. V'asav ish tahor es ether ha'para v'hi niach michutz lamachane b'makim tahor v'haisa ladas b'nei Yisrael lemish meres lemei nida chatas he. A ritually clean person shall gather the cow's ashes and place them outside the camp in a clean place, and it shall be as a keepsake for the congregation of the children of Israel, for sprinkling water used for cleansing. And so what does Rashi have to say about and place them outside the camp? He divided into three parts. One was put on the Mount of Olives, one was divided among all the watches, and one who put on the rampart surrounding the temple area. The one given to the watches was outside the courtyard, allowing access to it for the inhabitants of the outlying cities, whoever needed to purify himself. The one on the Mount of Olives was for the Kohanim, Gedolim, to sanctify themselves from it for use with other red cows. The one put on the rampart was kept as a keepsake by scriptural ruling, as it says it shall be as a keepsake for the congregation of Israel. Sifrei Chukat 30, Parav 311, Tosefta, Para 38. For sprinkling water. Hebrew Limei Nida. Water used for sprinkling, as in they cast the Yadu, a stone at me, to cast down the horns of the nations, an expression denoting throwing. For purification, chatas, an expression of cleansing, according to its simple meaning, but according to its halachot. Scripture calls it chatas, a sin offering, to tell us that it is like holy objects, and using it for personal benefit is usher, forbidden. Sifrei Chukat 34. The one who gathers the cow's ashes shall wash his clothes, and he shall be unclean until evening. It shall be an everlasting statute for the children of Israel and the proselyte who resides in their midst. That's one of the biggest questions. The one that throws the ashes on the other person, he becomes tameh. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Hanoigeya b'meis lechol nefesh adam v'tameh Shivas Yamim. Anyone touching the corpse of a human soul shall become unclean for 7 days. Hu yischata voy vayoim hashlishi uvayoim hashvi yitar ve'imloi yischata vayoim hashlishi uvayoim hashvi loy yitar. On the 3rd and 7 days he shall cleanse himself with it, so that he can become clean. But if he does not sprinkle himself with it on the 3rd and 7th days, he shall not become clean. Rashi says he shall cleanse himself with it, with these ashes. We use the paraduma ashes to purify ourselves. Kol hanoi gea b'meis v'nefesh ha'adam asher yamus v'loi yischata es mishkan adinai time v'nichrisa hanefesh hahi mi Yisrael ki mi nida loi zoirak alav tame yeh oid tumasoi voy. Whoever touches the corpse of a human soul which dies, and he does not cleanse himself, he has defiled the Mishkan of the Lord, and that soul shall be cut off from Israel. For the sprinkling water was not sprinkled on him, so he remains unclean, and his uncleanness remains upon him. Corpse of a human soul. Which type of corpse? That of a human soul. To exclude an animal. That is uncleanness, whatever you call it, does not require sprinkling. Another explanation of a human soul refers to a quarter of a log of blood necessary for maintaining life. He has defiled the Mishkan of the Lord. If he enters the courtyard, even after ritual immersion, without having been sprinkled on both the 3rd and the 7th days, see for Chukat 45. So the mikvah is not enough. You still have to go to you still have to get the sprinklings of the paraduma ashes. His uncleanness remains, although he ritually immersed himself. See for Chukat 45. This Zois HaTorah Adam ki yamus be'oihel kol haba el ha'oihel v'chol asher be'oihel yitma shivas. This is the law. If a man dies in a tent, anyone entering the tent and anything in the tent shall be unclean for 7 days. Anyone entering the tent. What does Rashi say while the corpse is inside? V'chol kli pasuach asher ein tzamid pesil alav tamehu. Any open vessel which has no seal fastened around it becomes unclean. Any open vessel. Scripture refers to an earthenware vessel whose exterior does not accept contamination, only its interior. Thus, if the seal around its top is not securely fastened, it becomes contaminated. But if there is a securely fastened seal, it remains clean. Sivrei Chukat 50 CHUL 25a. I don't know all the names of the Talmud. Fastened. Pasil, an expression meaning fastened. In Hebrew, similarly, with divine bonds, Niftali. I have been joined with my sister. Genesis 38. V'chol asher yiga al pnei hasadeh b'chalas cherev oi v'meis oi v'etzem adam oi b'kadver yitma shivas yamim. Anyone who touches one slain by the sword, or a corpse, or a human bone, or a grave in an open field, he shall be unclean for 7 days. In an open field, the sages expounded on this phrase to include the top and side of a coffin. Sefer Chukat 56 Chul 72a. But the simple meaning is that in an open field Where there is no tent, a corpse contaminates through contact. So if it's in the open area, you have to actually touch the body to be tameh, to be impure. So, whereas inside of a tent, like in someone's house or whatever, you touch their possessions, you could become tameh. V'lachu latameh me'afar serefas hachatas v'nasan alav ma'im chayim el keli. They shall take for that unclean person from the ashes of the burnt purification offering, and it shall be placed in a vessel filled with spring water. And that concludes today's Chumash with Rashi. But Hashem, it's going to be better in the future. Give it a week or two. I don't know how long the mail is going to take from Canada, but I'll be having the Rashi a little more clearly given to me. I think in the future I even want to get a Gutnick Chumash just for some Rebbe explanations. As a matter of fact, I have a Gutnick with me right now. Let's do Chukas and see what the Rebbe has anything to say about the first day of Chita. Since I have it, I'm going to do it, but I don't always have access to this, unfortunately. By the way, I appreciate if people can help with my channel. I'm always in need of help with books or even my monthly Zoom chat that I do every month. I got a sponsor this month for Chabad of YouTube. And I'm just going to continue to do more and more Torah learning and spreading it. So we're on part just Chukas, and I'm just going to see if there's anything the Rebbe has to say that's interesting about this Parsha. Because I don't know about y'all, we're learning so far was just about dead bodies and stuff. I'm not so excited about that. That's the whole thing about Torah. It's Nasa V'Nishma. Okay, so what is the spark of Chassidus with this Parsha? This is the super-rational command of the Torah. According to Chassidic thought, the mitzvah of the red heifer is referred to as the super-rational command of the Torah because it conveys a message which is fundamental to the Torah life. The spiritual root of all existence, Chassidus explains, is rhythmic and not static. Just as man's heart must continually contract and then relax, and his lungs must always inhale then exhale, so too the universe's spiritual life force also fluctuates in a constant cycle of emanation and withdrawal. For metaphysically speaking, everything is alive, being brought into existence constantly by God, and thus its inner core is pulsating energy. Yeah, Tanya brings this up from the Alter Rebbe that Hashem is creating the world every second. The Kabbalists describe this cycle as Ratzu, followed by Shuv, which literally means running toward spirituality and subsequently returning to the lower reality. In our own lives, Ratzu is the desire for transcendence, and in its most extreme form, the yearning to escape from corporeal existence and merge with divinity. Like the strong desire to go into spirituality. But generally speaking, it is the drive to elevate the world by stretching it beyond its material trappings. In an attempt to raise closer to God. During study, Ratzu expresses itself as the drive to explore and innovate new ideas, never remaining content with one's present knowledge. And practical observance, it ensures that a person does not stagnate at his present level, always seeking growth in mitzvah observance. That's amazing. So you should always try to grow. You shouldn't be happy where you are spiritually. But ultimately, Rutsu has a certain egotistical quality. For all forms of love, even the love of God, express a personal desire. So if it is left to its own devices, Rutsu may indeed fulfill the person's desire to leave the world and come closer to God. But God desires that man should find his destiny here in the lowly physical world where he was created. So while Rutsu has a positive effect in that it lifts a person's perception and aspirations above the mundane, it must be coupled with shuv, a sense of responsibility and discipline that causes a person to redirect his ambitions back into this world. An example of this was Aaron's two sons. When they were offering this strange sacrifice and they left the world, like they had a very strong rutsa, like they were so much into trying to cleave to God that they left their bodies. Basically, it was crazy. What was that? Nut of an Avihu. Shuv leads a person to draw godliness downward into this world through an emphasis on the practical. It is a spiritual pause before the next ascendancy will begin, during which one internalizes the mystical heights that were reached, making sure that they become part of one's nature and character. In study, Shuv represents bringing one's initial questions to a final resolution, making the knowledge real and concrete. Overall, it is disciplined commitment to a Torah life motivated by an acceptance of the yoke of the commandments. The red heifer is the suprarational command of the Torah, a central theme of Torah life because it exhibits a combination of both Rutsu and Shuv. First, the cow is completely burned, representing the passionate ascendancy of Rutsu, but then its ash is used to make sprinkling water, resembling Shuv, since water flows downward until it settles in a flat place. The lesson: just as both fire and water are crucial in preparing a red heifer, the dynamic tension between Rutsu and Shuv is the very essence of our relationship with God, a principle of the Torah. Wow, so you burn the red heifer, and that represents the cleaving to God, this fiery passion to rise up. Then it's mixed with water for the sprinkling or whatever. And the water represents Shuv, bringing it down or whatever. It's pretty cool. Now, how many red heifers were prepared throughout history? According to the Rambam, 9 red heifers were prepared from the time this mitzvah was given until the destruction of the second temple. The first was prepared by Moshe, the second by Ezra, and there were 7 from Ezra until the destruction of the temple. The 10th will be made by King Mashiach. May he be speedily revealed. Amen. May this be your will. Okay. Kind of skipped ahead about something, but that was pretty cool. Let's see right here. Why is the red heifer referred to as the suprarational command of the Torah? So, Rashi says it's because the Satan and the nations of the world caused grief to the Jewish people, saying, "What is this commandment? What purpose does it have?" Therefore, the Torah uses the term chukah, suprarational command. God says, "It is my personal decree. You do not have permission to ponder over it." We cannot question Hashem. We have to accept what He says. Ramban, the nations taunt the Jewish people about this mitzvah. Let's see. Okay. Rambam, the nations taught the Jewish people about this mitzvah for a similar reason to their derision about the scapegoat of Yom Kippur, because it is slaughtered outside the holy temple. Just for those that want to see what I'm actually reading. See, this is the Gutnick Chumash right here. Right now, why is the red heifer referred to as a suprarational command of the Torah? Now we're reading what Ber Chaim has to say. So he says the source of derision is the law that the pure person who performs the process becomes impure, and yet the impure person on whom the procedure becomes impure, and yet the impure person and the impure person on whom the procedure is performed becomes pure. Of course, we do find such a phenomenon in nature. Okay, so of course we do find such a phenomenon in nature too. For example, heat softens tin and yet will harden an egg. But one cannot bring proofs from nature to explain the mitzvahs of God. Or hachayim. Why does the verse use the expression, this is the suprarational command of the Torah, as if to say that this mitzvah is representative of the entire Torah? Because the laws of ritual impurity and impurity discussed here bring to light the effect of the Torah on the Jewish people. By receiving the Torah, the Jewish people become a holy people, and thereby they became an attraction for spiritual impurity. Thus, ironically, a Jewish body becomes ritually impure after the departure of the soul, due to the body's immense holiness, which attracts impurity. Rather like an empty jar of honey that attracts flies and insects. An additional explanation by writing this is the suprarational command of the Torah. The verse is hinting that if a person observes this mitzvah, he is credited with observing the entire Torah. For observing a mitzvah which makes no sense at all demonstrates a person's strong faith and commitment to observe all the mitzvahs too. Okay, the suprarational command of the Torah, verse 2. What is verse 2? It says, they shall bring you a perfectly red heifer which is devoid of blemish and has never had a yoke placed on it. In his commentary to Parshas Toldos, Rashi defines chukim, suprarational commands, things which the... What happened here? In this commentary to Parshas Toldos, Rashi defines chukim, suprarational commands, things which the evil inclination and the nations of the world argue against, such as eating pig and wearing shatnez, because they have no reason. Rather, they are decrees of the king, his statutes to his servants. Likewise, in Parshas Achrei, Rashi writes, they are decrees of the king against which the evil inclination argues. Why should we keep them? And the nations of the world argue against them. Examples are eating pig, wearing shatnez, and ritual purification through the sprinkling of water. Therefore, the verse says, I am God. I have decreed upon you, and you have no right to exempt yourselves. That's what Rashi to Vayikra 18:4 says. But here Rashi writes, Satan and the nations of the world caused grief to the Jewish people, saying, what is this commandment? What purpose does it have? God says, it is my personal decree. You do not have permission to question it. A number of differences are evident among Rashi's comments. In the previous instances, the evil inclination was the source of the opposition to observing the suprarational commands, whereas here, the evil inclination is not mentioned at all, but rather the opponents are the Satan and the nations of the world. On previous occasions, the opponents to the suprarational commands had been arguing against them, but here Rashi writes that the Jewish people are caused grief by their opponent. Okay. And our Parsha, Rashi writes, you do not have permission to ponder over it. Whereas earlier he wrote, here we go again. You do not have permission to ponder over it. Whereas earlier he wrote, you have no right to exempt yourselves. What is the reason for these changes at the literal level? Why is this mitzvah super rational? A further question here is why the mitzvah of the red heifer is considered to be super rational, a matter which Rashi apparently deemed to be self-understood. So Ber Chaim writes that this mitzvah is irrational because it causes pure individuals to become impure and the impure to become pure. However, Rashi writes explicitly that there is a logic behind this point, since the red heifer is an atonement for the golden calf, and just as the golden calf rendered everybody who dealt with it impure, likewise the red heifer renders all who deal with it impure. Rashi, end of chapter 19, in the name of Moshe Hadarshan. Why then is this mitzvah considered to be super rational? And finally, what problem was troubling Rashi here that prompted him to make his comments? Surely it was not the definition of the term chak, super-rational command, for this was clarified by Rashi on numerous other occasions as cited above. And that is the end for today. Just wanted to give a little bit of commentary of the Rebbe with the Rashi. It's good to learn a lot more, but my phone's about to die, and I wish everybody a successful week. This is Sunday's Chitas. I guess I hopped it really early. And I think I'm going to prepare the rest of the week later on today. Because I have better internet than Pueblo. Alright, bye-bye.